Welcome everybody. Glad to have you here at the third Power BI days. With us today we have Jeremy Lawson, and Jeremy, well, he's going to present something that we all basically need. Sometimes, you're working with data and you need to deduplicate some data. It can be easy, but I have a feeling that Jeremy is going to show us something, some cases where it's not that easy. So, Jeremy, we're all curious. Please share your knowledge with us.
Yeah, thank you, Hunt. So before we start, I just want to reinforce this the SQL Slack channel. That's the aka.ms/SQL Slack, and then make sure you join the Power BI Days channel within that. It can be really helpful in there. And if you've got any questions, fire them through, and we'll see what we can do. Thank you. So I'm Jeremy. I'm a full stack developer. So I'm really hacking my way through this data and BI. The problem I've got here, it's a very specific problem. I really love that sentiment analysis talk. That was kind of an end-to-end, very broad solution, lots of detail. I've actually tried to use some of that myself. It's really cool. This one, I've got one very specific problem, one very specific question, and interestingly, one line of DAX, which I've used to solve it. And part of what I'm hoping for is that somebody's going to point this out and go, hey, Jeremy, you're doing this all wrong. There's a much easier way. That would just make my day. So the question we have is, when you're dealing with survey data, I want to use the latest answers. I don't want to use an average or a sum. So a survey is when a person goes out there and finds an answer. In this case, I've said, let's check the temperature. And then they go again and check the temperature, and they go and check the temperature again. Now, sometimes you might want to take an average of them, but not always. That's not always valid. This time, I only want to use the latest check for that temperature. Here I've got a little bit of sample data. You can see that I've got 3 temperature checks on the 1st of April, 1 on the 2nd of April, 2 checks on the 3rd of April, and 2 checks on the 4th of April. And you can see I'm pointing out here which ones I want to use in my reporting. Now, being a full stack developer, this is very simple for me to do in programming code, and I can even do this in SQL or T-SQL with some windowing or some summary tables. Not so easy in Power BI that I've found. So what happens when I throw that data into my table, into my visualization? I get some funny numbers here. 96, that's not a temperature that I expected for the 1st of April. I'm just going to jump back to my data. What did I expect on the 1st of April? I expected 34. 96, that looks like it's summing up all of these. So what else can I do to avoid 96? I can try and change it over here. What are my options? I can say I want an average. Maybe that's okay. It's not really what I'm after. Minimum, a maximum. I can say don't summarize it. No, that's not what I want. Now I'm getting all of the data, not just the latest. So what are my options? And down here I've got some other visualizations. That single number style that we use. 177, that doesn't look like a valid one. 22.13. There's a reason that that's not right either, and I'll come back to that. What I have found here, right? So my total temperature there, I've tried to add up the 4 numbers that I know are correct, and they add up to 76. Now I'll just jump back and show you those 4 numbers. Remember over here, I'm just cherry picking the latest one for each day. So why is it getting to 177? So it's not using just the latest one per day. Now, my average, I say, should be 19. Why is Power BI calculating the average different to 19? And I think that's because it's averaging over all of the data, not just the latest one. But can you see that gives an unfair weighting to Monday's data because there's more entries for that one? That's definitely not what I want. Yeah, and I've got a little image in here about what are the aggregates that we can use. There's some average, maximum, and they can always fill a need. It's just not the need I want to use here. Now maybe I've chosen a bad example with temperature because I think the average temperature might be okay sometimes, but there are cases when that's not okay. So there are some instances where Power BI very easily gives you the option of using latest, but I think it's when it's not doing analysis on numbers, right? So when there's the date and I just want one date, it gives me the choice of picking the latest date. Or if I choose some other metadata out of my survey, like a city as part of my row, I can choose the last entry for that, whatever that means. So why can't I do it for the temperature? I've got a single number there, I've got the temperature. Why can't I pick the latest one there? That's what I really want. I want it to give me the latest. So here's the solution I've come up with, and hopefully there's a nicer one out there that somebody can tell me. I've got this one line of DAX and I've made a measure out of it. The idea here is that I am putting my data into buckets based on the date, because I want the latest per date. And I'm filtering my data to just have the latest one for each of that. You can see I'm using a date time to find the latest one. So for each date, it's giving me the latest temperature there. There's a bit more going on in here, but that's the key parts that's solving it for me. It's quite important to see that it's got an average up here. So this is how Power BI summarizes our data when it's not split out to show the individual buckets. So when I had that one tile, this tile, that's how it's going to work for us. Now, I've got my little table again. It's per date, and my numbers line up. 34, 6, 20, 16. 34, 6, 20, 16. Cool. So it feels like that should be problem solved, and it is for this particular case. If I take out the date, it does give me the number that I was expecting. So in this case, 19 is my average. And it does allow me to summarize it and put additional filters on in the view. Let me just put that date back in. So this is now acting exactly how I was expecting when I've broken it down to the date buckets and when I summarize it up a bit higher. That's kind of the answer that I've settled with, but there are a few problems with that. So if I want to summarize the data in a different way, it's not quite working how I expected. So here I've got Auckland as one of those other pieces of data is 24. If I go back to my raw data, I don't see 24 anywhere in that list. So what's happening there is it's taking just the 4 numbers that I've picked out, I think, or it's taking the filtered to Auckland, and then it's picking this one, 34 and 14, and it's averaging them. So in our line of DAX, we still have to tell it how to deal with multiple pieces of data, and we've asked it to average. So this isn't really a useful view for that data of the latest per date. It's okay, but it's not useful for what I wanted it for. So I guess this is a very crude way of getting that latest snapshot when there's multiple snapshots of the same data and you don't want to treat them all, you don't want to throw them all into there. I've used this for surveys and audits. So auditing a tank, auditing temperatures, auditing like a stock take for compliance checks. And it works for anything that's really under the statistical topic of a census. Some of the downsides are you can see I've used it, I guess it's a measure, and I've put it in a table exactly where I want it and it's worked. But if I was to throw this measure or this Power BI set to somebody else and they tried to use it, it wouldn't be quite so intuitive. I've said that I've programmed it to be an average as an aggregate style. So that's back in our DAX. We've got average there, right? But that's not so easy for people to change. So in a normal report, people expect to change those aggregates by using the drop-down fields in the Power BI designer, right? So they want to change from a sum or an average over here. Now, in my measure, I can't do that. They'll have to go and edit the DAX. Or if you want to have an average and a sum, then they have to create 2 measures, right? So it's a little bit not so intuitive. and you can't switch between the styles of aggregation easily. Now, I've used a date time to find the latest record. Latest for me meant latest in time, but latest might be defined lots of ways. You might use an ID, an incrementing ID, to define the latest, or latest might be defined in other ways. And you can do anything you want in that selection criteria for what the latest is. And you can get more than one, I guess, expression going on there. I'm not a pro at that sort of stuff, but I know that you can put more on there. You can filter it a little bit more to find your latest one. There's just a couple more small limitations that I found. So I haven't experienced this being really inefficient, but I feel like the way that I'm doing it, that over a very large data set, it wouldn't be the best way. Now, I've used a few million records and it hasn't been a problem, but I think with this sort of audit or survey data, you might have a data set that's really big. So I'm not sure how you're going to go with that. And the last one's a really quirky one. So I've still got this numeric aggregation, and I'll show you what I mean by that. In my latest query, we know that when we summarize it, it's going to average. That's fine. But down here, I've got this sum. And I'm not really doing any summing, so that didn't really make much sense. As a data designer, I know that when I apply this filter, it's only going to return one record per bucket. I know that. But my expression here doesn't guarantee that to the engine. So it still says, well, what if we find two records with that exact same max date and time? How do they want us to treat it? So because I know that it won't ever have two records for that, I don't care which one to pick. But if you might have two records for that, you might decide to put something else in there. You might decide to use an average or a max, or to put more selection criteria to guarantee that there's only one that's chosen. So those are the caveats, but I have to say that this is a really cool tool when you're stuck, right? So in the few situations that I've had where I've been designing reports for people, it's already outside of the realm where they'll want to tweak it themselves. So I'm putting the report together, and I've been able to use this to get the right data. Sometimes in my query, my bucket isn't as simple as one, so I might have 2 or 3 or 4 criteria for the bucket. So this might be a temperature per date, per city, per auditor, to get the unique values, depending on how your survey's done and how you're analysing it. And yeah, so the last one is, if you've got a better solution for this, I'd really love to hear it. This is something that I keep running into again and again with different businesses that I work with different reports that I'm writing. They're not always the same real world scenario, but they always boil down to the same problem in the reporting. I know how to do this in Power Query, and I can do it in SQL, and I can do it in code, but you don't always have the chance to change that stuff. So I guess that's why it's really nice to be able to do it in PowerBI. That's really the end of the bits that I've got to show you. So I wonder if there are any questions, or if somebody already has a better answer for me there.
I think you blew them all away. I'm impressed by the way you made your presentation / huge demo, which is very nice. It certainly inspired me. And I'm guessing people just fell off their chairs and they can't ask any questions now, or they're going like, oh yeah, you're right, this is actually the best way.
Well, if somebody comes up with something later, I'd love to hear it. You can fire it through on the Slack, the Power BI days, or get in touch with me directly. Yeah, otherwise I'll share these slides so that you can ponder over it and point out where I've made mistakes. That would be lovely.
Yeah, I will be retweeting them as well, because that's a good thing. Have you asked people like Marco Russo already, or Alberto Ferrari?
Not them specifically, but I have asked around quite a bit at various days, and I haven't come up with any better solutions yet. A lot of times the question comes down to, why is your data in that format in the first place? And like I say, sometimes the better solution is to get your data in the right presentation before it gets to Power BI, but that's not always available. It's not always the case.
Yeah, true. That's usually not even the case.
No.
Okay, well, Jeremy, thank you very much for doing this a short but very insightful presentation. I'm sure we'll be talking about it for quite a while. Rishi is asking if you can also share that small data set together with your slides.
Absolutely.
And then he will have a go at using selected values slash values, which is essentially the same method as he mentions.
Right.
So yeah, it
Cool.
seems that something else will happen, will come out of this.
Yeah.
You
Thank
might
you.
get your response.
Yeah, hopefully. Thanks for the chance to talk.
Hey, you're very welcome. Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.